At 7 o'clock on a quiet Monday morning, a police cruiser slid into my driveway like it was responding to a hostage situation. Lights off, but engines still growling, and before I even had time to process what I was seeing, a man in uniform was already stepping out, hand resting just a little too comfortably on his holster. He didn't knock. He didn't introduce himself. He just looked at me and said, "Hand over the pool keys right now, or you're under arrest for trespassing." I remember standing there barefoot on cold concrete, coffee still steaming in my hand, trying to figure out how using a neighborhood pool I paid for every month somehow turned into a criminal offense. And then I saw her, standing behind him on the sidewalk, wrapped in a silk robe like she was watching a show she'd paid good money for. Was his wife, the HOA president, smiling like Christmas had come early. That's when I knew this wasn't about rules. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name's Ethan Cole, and until a few months before that morning, I honestly believed I'd already survived the worst life had to offer. I spent over a decade working federal cases that don't make the news until years later, the kind that follow you into your sleep and never fully let go. When I finally stepped away, it wasn't because I was tired of the work, it was because my wife, Rachel, was tired of wondering whether every unanswered phone call meant she'd be raising our kids alone. So we did what a lot of Americans do when they want a fresh start. We bought a modest house in a quiet suburb called Brookstone Ridge. Nothing fancy. Beige siding. Decent schools. A community pool. The kind of place where the biggest controversy should have been whose dog kept digging under the fence. For the first few days, everything felt exactly like the life we'd been chasing. Freshly cut grass, sprinklers clicking on at dawn, kids riding bikes in lazy circles until dinner. I remember thinking, maybe this is it. Maybe this is where the noise finally stops. Then I met her. Her name was Meredith Vaughn, though everyone whispered it like a warning label. HOA president. Self-appointed neighborhood gatekeeper. She showed up on day 3, right as I was unloading my truck, clipboard in hand, heels clicking against the driveway, like punctuation marks. She didn't say hello. She didn't ask how the move went. She just handed me a violation notice printed on thick paper like it was a diploma. Commercial vehicle parked in residential driveway. Section something something. $200 per day until resolved. I tried to explain it wasn't commercial, just tool for my old job, but she cut me off mid-sentence with a smile that never reached her eyes. Some vehicles, she said, glancing toward her own driveway, contribute to neighborhood safety. Others don't. That's when I noticed the patrol car parked in front of her house. Same one now, sitting in my driveway weeks later. Her husband's. Back then, I let it go. Because when you've spent years dealing with real criminals, you don't immediately recognize one wearing yoga pants and quoting bylaws. You tell yourself it's just HOA nonsense. Temporary friction. It'll smooth out. It didn't. That weekend, my kids discovered the community pool. They came home soaked and smiling, talking over each other about diving boards and snack machines and how big the water was. Rachel looked at me with that look she gets when she's imagining normal memories finally replacing the hard ones. So Sunday afternoon, we went back together. And that's when Meredith reappeared like she'd been waiting. She walked straight toward us, phone already in hand, and told us pool access for new residents was under review. Background verification, she called it. Said we need to surrender our access cards until approval cleared. My kids didn't understand. Neither did I. We left without a scene, but something settled in my chest on the walk home, heavy and familiar. The feeling you get when someone isn't enforcing rules, they're testing limits. Monday morning confirmed it. That's how I ended up staring down a police officer in my own driveway over a set of pool keys. The way he spoke wasn't confident. It was performative, loud enough for neighbors to hear, close enough to intimidate. I could smell cigarettes and cheap cologne when he leaned in, and behind him, Meredith crossed her arms, enjoying every second. I asked for an incident number. He didn't like that. I asked why a civil HOA issue required a uniformed response. He liked that even less. And when I pulled out my phone and started recording, his jaw tightened in a way I'd seen 100 times before on people who thought authority meant immunity. He warned me to be careful. Said causing trouble wouldn't end well. As he drove off, I stood there longer than I should have, listening to the engine fade, realizing something important. This wasn't just one bad neighbor. This was a system, and systems always leave a trail. That night, instead of unpacking boxes, I opened a notebook I hadn't used in years and started writing names, dates, small details that didn't feel small anymore. Because the moment someone uses a badge to enforce personal power, it stops being a neighborhood issue and becomes something else entirely. Once you see a pattern, you can't unsee it. That was the problem. The next few days, I tried to convince myself I was overreacting, that this was just small-town politics mixed with an overzealous HOA and a cop who didn't know where his authority ended. But every time I replayed that morning in my head, something new stuck out. The way he never mentioned a report. The way he never wrote anything down. The way Meredith never said a word, just stood there smiling like she'd already won. So instead of letting it eat at me, I did the one thing I knew how to do. I paid attention. I started walking the neighborhood in the evenings, not like someone looking for trouble, just a guy stretching his legs after dinner. I waved at people, made small talk, complimented lawns, asked harmless questions. You'd be amazed how much people will tell you when they think you're just another neighbor trying to fit in. That's how I met Mrs. Caldwell. She lived 3 houses down, mid-60s, retired school librarian, the kind of woman who still mailed handwritten birthday cards and kept her hedges trimmed with military precision. When I mentioned the pool situation, her smile flickered, just for a second, and then she looked past me, straight toward Meredith's house. They don't like it when people ask questions, she said quietly. That was it. No elaboración. No drama. Just a fact. Over the next week, I heard variations of the same story. A couple who'd moved out suddenly after a string of noise complaints that never seemed to bother anyone else. A mechanic who got repeated code enforcement visits over a shed that had been there for 10 years. A single mom whose parking permits kept getting lost whenever she was late on HOA fees. Different people. Same outcome. Anyone who pushed back disappeared. The HOA meeting that Thursday night confirmed everything. It was labeled an emergency session, which already told me they wanted speed over scrutiny. The room was half full at best, folding chairs scraping against the floor as people sat where they always did, heads down, voices low. Meredith sat at the front, gavel in hand, posture perfect like she was auditioning for something bigger than a volunteer role. She opened by announcing serious safety concerns and immediately pivoted to me. Apparently, I had threatened a police officer. Apparently, I was hostile. Apparently, my access to community amenities needed to be revoked for the good of everyone else. No evidence. No specifics. Just a narrative. I stood up slowly, not angry, just calm, and asked what incident she was referring to. Asked when the board planned to review the footage she claimed existed. Asked why a vote was being called without a quorum present. Her smile didn't falter, but her fingers tightened around the gavel. She adjourned the meeting early. That was when Tyler pulled me aside. Tyler and his wife lived near the corner, quiet couple, early 30s. He looked over his shoulder before speaking, like he expected someone to be listening. We got videos, he said, of him. That night, they came over with a laptop and a folder so thick it barely closed. The footage was clean. Too clean. Nighttime recordings of a patrol car idling outside their house. Flashlights sweeping windows. License plates photographed. A uniformed figure testing a gate latch at 2 in the morning. No report numbers. No calls logged. Just intimidation. Then his wife opened the folder. She worked at a bank. Not high up. Just enough to notice when things didn't line up. HOA checks written to companies she couldn't find anywhere. Maintenance invoices with round numbers and vague descriptions. Thousands of dollars for work no one remembered seeing. One company had been registered less than a month before Meredith became HOA president. And the signatures, both of them, that's when the weight of it finally settled. This wasn't harassment for fun. It was protection. You question the money, the badge shows up. You stay quiet, life stays easy. Once I understood that, everything Meredith did made sense. The selective enforcement, the obsession with control, the way she talked about standards like they were moral absolutes. She wasn't protecting the neighborhood. She was milking it. Things escalated fast after that. City inspectors showed up while Rachel and I were both at work. Grass measured down to fractions of an inch. Trash cans cited for being visible for too long. Mailbox angle violations I didn't know existed. My kids noticed. That's the part that still makes my jaw tighten. My daughter asked if we were in trouble, if we'd done something wrong. My son stopped riding his bike past Meredith's house. Fear spreads quietly. That night, I set up cameras. Not obvious ones. Not flashy. Just enough to capture what needed capturing. And sure enough, the patrol car started circling. Slow passes. Lingering stops. Late-night checks. He didn't know he was documenting his own career collapse. The final piece came from a place I didn't expect. Buried in old HOA documents, written in language dry enough to make your eyes glaze over, was a clause about emergency management transfer. If the board engaged in fraud or breached fiduciary duty, the original developer retained the right to step back in and take control. Most people never read that far. I did. The next morning, I made a call. The developer's attorney didn't sound surprised. Tired, maybe, like someone who'd been waiting for a shoe to drop for years. When I sent over the evidence, there was a long pause on the line. Then he said, "We'll handle this." They moved faster than Meredith ever had. A special meeting was scheduled. Open attendance. Financial review. Media invited. Meredith didn't know any of this when she walked in that night, gavel in hand, ready to put on another show. She didn't know the projector was loaded. She didn't know the developer's legal team was seated in the front row. She definitely didn't know federal investigators had already been looped in. She smiled when she saw me. That smile faded about 10 minutes later, when the bank records hit the screen, when the shell companies were named, where her husband's signature appeared, larger than life, right where it shouldn't have been. She tried to shut it down. He tried to take control. And then someone from the back of the room spoke up. Not loudly, not angrily, just clearly. And that's when everything changed. The voice from the back of the room didn't shout, didn't demand attention. It just cut clean through the noise like a blade sliding out of its sheath. "Officer Vaughn," the woman said calmly, "please take your hand off your weapon." Every head turned. She didn't look like local law enforcement. No uniform, no badge clipped to a belt. Just a dark blazer, neutral expression, and a confidence that didn't ask for permission. She stepped forward slowly, holding credentials at chest height long enough for the room to register what they were seeing. Federal. The temperature changed instantly. You could feel it in the way people stopped shifting in their chairs, the way Meredith's mouth opened slightly and then closed again like her brain was lagging behind reality. Her husband froze where he stood, halfway between intimidation and retreat, suddenly aware that whatever script he'd memorized no longer applied. The agent introduced herself, explained there was an ongoing investigation into misuse of authority, financial fraud, and civil rights violations connected to the HOA. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The evidence was still glowing on the screen behind her. Bank statements and invoices frozen in time. Numbers that didn't care how important Meredith thought she was. Meredith tried to speak. Nothing came out. Then she did what people like her always do when control slips through their fingers. She lashed out, claimed persecution, claimed conspiracy, accused neighbors of betrayal, pointed at me like I'd orchestrated some personal vendetta. And in a way, she was right. I stood up, slowly, feeling every eye in the room settle on me. Not with fear this time, but curiosity. I didn't raise my voice either. I just told the truth. I said I'd recognize the pattern because I'd spent years dismantling similar ones. That intimidation only works when people are isolated. That money leaves trails no matter how carefully you try to hide them. That using a badge to protect theft doesn't make it smarter, it just makes it federal. Her husband tried one last time to assert authority, started barking orders, telling people to clear the room. That's when the agent stepped closer to him and said words I don't think he ever expected to hear in his own neighborhood. "You're under arrest." The sound of handcuffs is unmistakable. It's not loud, but it lands heavy, metallic, final. When they closed around his wrists, Meredith made a noise I'll never forget, something between disbelief and rage, like her entire worldview had cracked in half. She screamed. She cried. She demanded explanations from people who no longer owed her anything. When they took her to, the room didn't cheer at first. It was quiet, processing quiet. The kind that comes when something oppressive finally lifts and you don't know what to do with the extra air. Then someone clapped. Then another. And suddenly the room was standing. Neighbors who hadn't spoken in years looking at each other like survivors of the same storm, realizing they'd all been carrying the same weight alone. The developer's attorney explained what would happen next. Emergency management, full audit, restitution, transparency, no more selective enforcement, no more threats whispered behind closed doors. People listened. For the first time, they believed it. 6 months later, I'm sitting by that same pool. My kids are louder now. They cannonball without asking permission. They've made friends whose parents no longer flinch when a patrol car drives by. Rachel laughs more easily. So do I. Brookstone Ridge didn't become perfect overnight. No place does. But the fear left. The quiet kind that eats at you. Meredith pled out. So did her husband. The money came back. The HOA got rebuilt from the ground up, slower this time, with eyes open and records posted publicly. Some neighbors still think I went too far. They say I could have moved, could have ignored it, could have let it go. Maybe. But here's the thing I learned a long time ago and had almost forgotten. Power only works when people believe it's untouchable. The moment you question it, document it, shine light on it, it shrinks back into what it always was, just another bully hoping no one pushes back. So I'll ask you this. If this happened in your neighborhood, would you have stayed quiet or would you have done something about it? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every one.